I take a lot of inspiration from my previous career working in government. I worked for about 8 years with the provincial government in multiculturalism and anti-racism as public education coordinator, and then in a policy role after that. And really working with community and looking at different ways to bring folks together in different ways who may not cross paths. Is something that's really important to me. So a lot of my work, including what's in the courtyard, Nothing to be Done, is intended to be a gathering space of sorts. Some of the work that I've done in the past has also been around these themes, including Third Beach, other iterations of the Moon Picnic, and then the project I'm developing with the city of Kelowna as their artist in residence. I also work regularly with political text and language, and that also comes out of my time working with government and some of the rhetoric and language that's used in government and frames the way that the policy that dictates the way that we connect. So it first started by putting pen to paper, really. I start all my projects with just a one-page kind of written brief or description of what the work will look like, and then kind of placing it within artistic context as well. And I always use that as my guiding document before I start looking at materials or anything like that. So for instance, when I first did this work for the Kelowna Art Gallery, I knew I was going to be doing a moon. So it's not that I was like, I work with resin, I'm going to do something made out of resin. It was a solution to the problem of how do I make a moon and how do I make it in the dimensions and so on and so forth for the space. So the same process was followed with this project. And once again, COVID has kind of played a bit of a role. The work, I have to say, would have looked very different if we wouldn't have had the same disruptions, but at the same time, it was a really interesting challenge to be able to work through a creative process during this time, and how my feelings and emotions also kind of went into the work. The title being changed, Nothing to Be Done, really reflecting on some of the other themes that came about that are presented in Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, which is the source material for this. The work is really existential, and where in previous iterations I was looking at kind of more of the themes of bringing people together and this idea of a space that's a bit more about loitering. So two of the characters, Vladimir and Estragon, they just linger and wait underneath this tree for the entirety of the play, and nothing really happens. They're waiting for Godot, and Godot never ends up showing up. There's a few other characters who pass through, but it's really existential in that way. And so for this show, and because of COVID, I really looked at some more of these existential themes and this idea of waiting and uncertainty and not really knowing what's going on, which are things I think a lot of people nowadays can relate with. And also in the title, Nothing to Be Done, is reflective of that theme, and it's also the first line of the play. Yes, there's a couple of different relationships. So the first one is really just looking at it as a community gathering space, or pulling back on those themes of a place for people to be, and how does it shape, how does it provide a space for people to kind of be and perhaps connect with others. And that's a strong theme that carries through with my other work, including with When It Is Necessary to Stand Still, which is the name of the project that I'm doing with the city of Kelowna as their artist in residence. The second way is through materiality. So going back to COVID again, the moon and the tree base are both made of resin. The shells that I'm making the beacons out of for the city, our artist in residence project, are also made out of resin. Pre-COVID, neither of these projects, the tree or the beacons, would have used resin, but it was a material I knew I would be able to work with at home. and not have to rely on like outside sources for like cutting or developing it all. And there are materials I knew I could get on hand. So really, this has kind of been the season of resin for me. I want people's imaginations to be captured really by the moon, the gigantic moon, and just the nature of the tree, and being able to see the visible roots and how the work is presented in that way. I want to kind of capture both the absurdity and the beauty of the original play and the material that it references, and bring people to a space where they can sit and contemplate